Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, April 3rd, 2020. The coronavirus and the economic impact on the United States. Now, daily we hear from medical experts who disagree on not only the actual threat presented by the coronavirus, but also what steps governments at all levels should take to combat it. Now, regardless of what government actions are or aren't taken, the fact remains that almost all of the U.S. economy has been negatively affected, some parts more than others. Now, most small businesses and many large businesses simply don't have the financial reserves necessary to continue paying their employees or to keep paying their bills for very long if they have to close. This is due in large measure to the penalties on production and savings built into the income payroll tax system. Even essential businesses that remain open are generally operating with fewer employees, and many have been forced to cut the wages of those employees. Many of these businesses are seeing greatly reduced revenue and are having difficulty paying their bills. Now, this is creating a cascading problem for all of us. If a business or individual's income is cut significantly, then they probably can't pay their rent or their mortgage. Payments to suppliers and vendors aren't made. Neither are car payments and credit card payments, and the list goes on. Many items, like paper goods, have disappeared from store shelves. Most roads are nearly empty because there are few places to go and people have been ordered to stay home. Restaurants, schools, colleges, movie theaters, athletic events, and other activities are closed or canceled. Many working mothers can't go to their jobs, even if that job is still there, because their children can't go to school. Now, all of these dire circumstances have created the demand for the federal government to step in and save the people. Thus, the CARES Act. On March 27, 2020, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economy Security Act, otherwise known as the CARES Act, became law. The following is from a summary prepared by Foley & Lardner, LLP, the lobbyist law firm that likely made millions lobbying for their clients. There are 8 points here. First, the CARES Act creates a $349 billion loan program for small businesses, including 501c3 nonprofits and medical and dental practices. These loans can be forgiven through a process that incentivizes companies to retain employees. It allocates $500 billion for assistance to businesses, states, and municipalities, with no more than $46 billion going to support passenger air carriers, air cargo carriers, and businesses important to maintaining national security. The remaining $454 billion may be used to support lending to eligible businesses, states, and municipalities. It allocates $130 billion in relief to the medical and hospital industries, including funds for medical supplies and drug and device shortages. The Act expands telehealth services in Medicare, including services unrelated to COVID-19 treatments. It provides for payments of up to $1,200 each to Americans making $75,000 or less, or $150,000 or less for couples who file joint returns, or $112,500 or less for head of household. Plus, there's an additional payment of $500 for each child. These payments are to be made as rapidly as possible. The Act expands eligibility for unemployment insurance and provides people with an additional $600 per week on top of the unemployment amounts determined by each state. It expands the Defense Production Act, allowing for a period of 2 years when the government may correct any shortfall in resources without regard to the current expenditure limit of $50 million. And finally, the CARES Act provides the Secretary of the Treasury with the authority to make loans or loan guarantees to states, municipalities, and eligible businesses, and it loosens a variety of regulations imposed through the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, the Economic Stabilization Act of 2008, and others. Now let's look at the CARES Act and the FAIRtax. Now, none of the 8 items listed above rely in any way on the present income payroll tax system. Now, yes, some of the provisions allow businesses to retain the employer share of payroll taxes to help offset the cost of paying employees, but this could be done more easily with a direct grant based on the number of employees. Now, normally, the lobbyists in Congress like to bury special benefits for their friends deep within the tax code where they are pretty well hidden from view. Neither the ruling class nor anyone in Congress expects the rest of us to challenge the corrupt and incomprehensible income payroll tax system. However, if we were operating under the FAIRtax, we could all calculate on a napkin the amount it would cost each of us if the CARES Act payments were not merely added to the national debt, but were paid from current revenues. The ruling class and members of Congress know we could never calculate this cost under the corrupt and incomprehensible income payroll tax system. Now, who among us really believes that the soon-to-be $25 trillion national debt will not have to be repaid? And who among us can calculate how much it will cost each of us to pay off the national debt over 20 years? Well, with the FAIRtax, you can. If you amortized a $25 trillion debt over 20 years at 4%, the annual payment would be $1.818 trillion. Now, each percentage point of the current 23% FAIRtax rate will bring about $200 billion into the Treasury. So this means that to make that $1.8 trillion annual payment, the FAIRtax rate would have to increase by 9% to a rate of 32%. Now, although not exact, if we wanted to keep the essentials excluded from the FAIRtax with the monthly prebate/tax credit, we would need to add an additional 2%, and this 11% would be added to the current 23% rate, making the new rate 34%. Now, most of us calculate the cost of the FAIRtax by adding it to the cost of the new goods and retail services we buy. This means that to purchase a dollar item and pay the FAIRtax on it, it would cost $1.30 because 30 cents is 23% of $1.30. Again, 23% is the inclusive rate. For each dollar paid, 23 cents is FAIRtax, 77 cents is for the product. Now, this is the same way the income tax rates are quoted, and we're making a direct comparison to the income tax. Confusing? Well, yeah, but that's what the ruling class and Congress want. Now, under a new 34% FAIRtax, we would pay approximately $1.50 to purchase that dollar item. A 50% increase in the price? Horrifying. Well, yeah, it is. But that's the reality of what it would cost us to pay for our continuing federal expenses and retire the national debt. This also explains why Congress and their ruling class bosses are so afraid of the FAIRtax. The FAIRtax shows all of us what a terrible job they've done, and a terrible job they will continue to do as long as they can hide behind the income payroll tax system. In conclusion, Benjamin Franklin was one of those essential men without whom there would not have been a successful revolution against Britain or the creation of our Constitution. During the debate on the ratification of the Constitution, many opponents were concerned about the power of the Congress and the President and how they could take away the people's liberty. Franklin said, "This will be the best security for maintaining our liberties. A nation of well-informed men who have been taught to know and prize the rights which God has given them cannot be enslaved. It is in the religion of ignorance that tyranny begins." Now, it's obvious that the income payroll tax system keeps us ignorant of what benefits we are getting are actually costing us. Now, just like we would not tolerate a store hiding their prices from us, we must not tolerate the income payroll tax system hiding the cost of government from us. Now, Franklin also said, democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. Now, Franklin wasn't talking about just being armed with weapons. He was talking about being armed with knowledge. In order to be well-armed lambs, we need to understand what our representatives are spending and how that spending affects us. Do you want to be well-armed? Do you want the ability to hold your elected representatives accountable for the good or bad job they're doing? Do you want to be able to calculate on a napkin what federal spending is costing you? If so, go to FAIRtax.org and join us. Then contact your member of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the FAIRtax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.